this is Fernando is myself. University of Campinas, it's a state university sponsored by the state of São Paulo. São Paulo is the city which is the capital of the state of São Paulo. Campinas is about 1 hour driving non-stop. It's a pretty young university. It's 50 years old, 52 actually. But despite being young, it's quite strong for our standards, of course, especially in science and engineering. So it became one of the major Brazilian universities, together with the University of São Paulo, Rio, many Catholic universities that is in there. I'm in the School of Electrical Computer Engineering. It's interesting because the first time it came to Berkeley, it was in the beginning of the 80s. When I visited Soda Hall, the first time I met Lotfi Zadeh, it was the first time that I meet personally. Then I heard some history, some guides. I was young PhD students. I also met some good friends of him, like Professor Paulo, that was working in optimization. That's basically, by the way, a friend of mine from Rio that was doing his postdoc here. Actually, he was instrumental to recall some history we told you a little bit later. Well, this is maybe the first publication, the first work that was broadly available, published by somebody in Brazil. In 1977, of course, it was published in the area of mathematics. This is just a snapshot of the paper. That's as far as I know, because I try to collect all those data before to come here, before this history becomes another amnesia in our history. So I try to collect as soon as I could. But as far as I know, this is the first paper that was published in the literature for Brazil, for Institute of Mathematics. It just happened by chance that it was exactly the University of Campinas. Unicamp is the nickname of University of Campinas. That's basically what it is. This was 41 years ago. It was done, it was suggested by Lotfi himself. But this was not the paper, the first one published in the Brazilian community, as far as I know. The first one published in Portuguese is this one. It's written in Portuguese, but I'm sure that you can recognize some words. The second Brazilian Conference on Automatics, it means automatic control and automation. This was back in 1978. Actually, this paper is going to be 40 years old this year. It was published in Portuguese. This was the first one. Ricardo Stanchard is a good friend. He's still alive. He's a very good friend and still doing quite well. He was one of he has done some work together with Mandami in UK many years ago. He was one of the first students in the Catholic University of Rio. By the way, it just happened by chance that the Pontifical Catholic University of Rio is the one who is organizing the IEEE World Conference on Computational Intelligence next July in Rio. You are invited to come. Almost, because I think the deadline just finished. Well, this was the second. Of course, I will not mention all of them because of the time we have available, but this is the second, 40 years ago. And after that, many papers came in several different areas. For instance, Ahmed Rashid, it has to be the chairman. Some of you know him. Ahmed is a medical doctor. He has retired, but he's been quite active in this area, and he's quite well known in the physics community. He was the chairman of the 6th IFSTA conference that happens in São Paulo back. Augustine was there. Probably you remember that. We do. This is one of the work that he has done. The interesting about Armando, he's a medical doctor. He's still active in the area of health science, But the interesting about him is a quite close friend. Because he, despite being a medical doctor, he writes something like doing mathematics. And when we explain the mathematics he's doing to us, we do understand quite well. But when we read it again next day, of course, it does not make sense. We have to relearn everything because it's not real mathematics, but it makes sense for him. It's a kind of interesting language that he used. But anyway, this is what back in the 80s. Himself developed something like this, about something that's quite being explored recently in text understanding, natural language, together with the Department of Physiology. This is a book that Armando wrote in 1992. It's about the theory of brain machines. This is books basically about how to do what we call today neural systems from the physiological point of view. For instance, for him, max and min, it's okay. Everybody knows how to do this kind of algebraic. But for him, min, it's important because when the neural activity it depends of the number of transmitters and the receptors who are chemical compounds and some mediators. So if there are more receptors than transmitters, depend of the mediators, the message, the neural message, the neural communication may not go that strong. So he intuitively used this kind of physiological operators to model neural process because it does match his perception as a medical doctor, as a biology, how this stuff works. And a very important thing that we always forget in as engineers, neural computation, that's the presence of mediators. That's some chemical compounds that mediate the combination between transmitters and receivers, receptors and transmitters in this neural communication. But anyway, it's a kind of long book that they published. There was a major. This is a picture of São Paulo, 1995. I think you could recognize some people over here. Lotfi is right here. This is Roventa. This is Hans Zimmermann. This is Armando, the guy who I just talked about. He's a medical doctor. This is Ron Yeager, Michio, Jamshidi, Wang. This is myself when I used to have some, some hair. Vitold, I don't remember this. I don't remember those two guys. I tried to use some, shampoo, but it does not work anymore. This was back in São Paulo in the campus of the University of the Catholic University of São Paulo. Actually, I guess this was the last time that Lotfi was in Brazil, as far as I know, but was not the first. Lotfi used to tell me something about his visit in Brazil, but I did not remember quite. We told him this many years ago. Then I tried to recover what he has done before. And I was fortunate because I remember when I came here for the first time in 1983, I met him, as I told you in the beginning. Then I met a friend of mine who was doing some PhD, postdoc in optimization together with Pravin Varaya and Polak. Somehow I reminded him. Then after consulting many people who didn't know exactly what Lotfi was doing in the late 60s in Brazil, he could help me to remind, then exchange some emails. Maybe I recognized that indeed I recovered the history. Lotfi was in Brazil in the 1969 in the University of Rio de Janeiro for 2 weeks. Lotfi and Faye. They stayed there for a while, meet some people, some young guys, like young professors, and together with Jean-Paul Jacob. Jean-Paul Jacob was a Brazilian, was professor here. Actually, when I saw this name, he used to be an advisor of this when he retired. I do not know if he's here. The last news I have from him, he was not that good. Maybe he's not here anymore. Anyway, Jean-Paul was a good friend of Lotfi, and he brought Lotfi to Brazil. 1969, Lotfi suggests a kind of joint program. There was further development. Indeed, the next year, 1917, the Federal University of Rio created the first program in systems in computing. Lotfi has suggested to be systems, control, computing, and economy. Control was in the electrical engineering department, so they put it apart. Economics, you know, economists do not like the engineer that much. Then they put economics apart. Then they remain computing systems. This became a major program. Still today, it's one of the major programs in the University in Rio. So this was the last time. The first time was in 1969. In the Army, this program is doing quite well. And people do remember it was a major contribution of Lotfi. Basically, he was the creator. There are some further exchange programs because I don't have too much time to then we go ahead. This is a book by myself, told in 1998, 1999, one of the first books published in Brazil about, easy to see, control and modeling. So Portuguese is very close to English. You see the fuzz is the same. The first book in fuzzy control. This is one of the only book that I am aware of, fuzzy Petri nets, written by two colleagues, Eloisa, two girls, Eloisa and Jeanette. This is one book about, again, it's a good example that Portuguese and English is the same, artificial intelligence, where there is one or two chapters on fuzzy sets. This is another more recent book about the same colleagues that works in the school for medical school at São Paulo, about fuzzy arithmetics and quantum computing. It's interesting because all those guys are medical doctors, and these guys, it's especially. This is a more recent book on fuzzy systems for the human-centered computing. And more recently, another college, those are American physicists, mathematicians, and mathematicians. They have developed a quite applied mathematical approach for epidemiology. Actually, they have used the model that they published in this book in São Paulo area for this specific purpose. Well, this is NAFIPS 2012 here. This is my fellow mathematician. This is mathematician. Myself, I'm not a mathematician, engineer. This is another fellow, Brazilian, that was a few blocks from here. This is another Brazilian book. This is a more recent book written by Luciana. Luciana is this girl over here. This is my colleague of mathematician, Professor Laes. They are the authors of this book, together with a good friend, Barnabas. You just sit right in the middle of the and this may be one of the last books. It's called the first course in fuzzy logic, fuzzy understanding in biomathematics. This group, they are quite good in biomathematics, as far as I know, of course. And that has been written by all those colleagues, including Professor Weldon Lodwick. Many of you know about him. Well, this is from the academic side. Of course, it's very, there are many more, but of course it doesn't. But there are many actual real-world applications. I mean, just mention some of the most important that I am aware of. There are many of them. The first one, it is a smart oil recovery system. This was developed many years ago, 1995. It's a computer-controlled, distributed computer system. This was implemented in the northeast part of the country, where the Brazilian oil company pumps oil from the soil. The last time I saw this work many years ago, there was a bunch of more than 100 local station supervisor control. They're doing quite well because 2 or 3% improvement in this kind of process means a lot of. Another major project, it was movement planning of freight railroad. In particular, this application was from the Carajás mines. This is the northeast, maybe one of the biggest iron ore mine in the world. We compete with Australia. This is a single-track railway, except for some crossing yard. This is a major port. It's about 1,900 kilometers away. The idea here is what trains going up, going down. Of course, they have to cross only the crossing yards. Many trains, but the train here is made 3 kilometers, 4 kilometers trains. It's a kind of huge, very heavy, very complicated. So the idea of this system was how to schedule trains going up and down in such a way they could meet the plans, save fuel, do not delay because here's a mine, here there are ships, and ships are quite big, very complicated. There are some rules. If delays are very much expensive, so they have to manage. It was a major development because, train is train, but the load is not the same. The train engineers do not drive the same way. A lot of unpredictable stuff. It's a lot of interesting things. This was implemented. Actually, it's interesting because after many years working, this became a major project. There are many places in the world that use this kind of, not exactly the same, but a spin-off of this system worldwide. This was another measure in the same company. This is Stockpile iron recovery. This is complicated. It's the same sort of problem that when you have to store and to recover data from a hard disk. There is no algorithm how to store data fast to recover fast. Of course, we do not feel that. This is very complicated algorithm. As far as I know, there is no optimal way to do that. At least in the Knut book, The Art of Computing, there is no such a thing. This is based, so of course, this is not a hard disk. You have to stock iron ore, but you have to recover for shipping. This is brought by the trains that you just saw. And of course, they have some conveyors belts that show to the ships. This was also work I'm not. Many algorithms to stream flow forecast for power production. This is one example of a measure called furnace. And finally, one major decision make. This is work in clinical. It's a little bit different from the one. This is part of an automated clinical laboratory automation system that works 24 hours. This is really interesting. In the beginning, this was a prototype for thyroid hormone profiling. Today, this has been extended for most. This is basically automated. It's interesting because in the beginning, the doctors did not trust that much. Then they keep watching the rate of classification. They were doing quite well. They start to increase. After 1 year testing, almost 95% of the exams were automated. Decided only 5% those that the medical doctor much look closely. It became very interesting. They have expanded this with different areas. Well, another important thing that happens every year is the Brazilian Conference on Fuzzy Systems. You have some numbers. The first, each 2 years, this next one is going to be this year in Fortaleza, 1 week before WCCI. This is going to be in July. And of course, together with the Brazilian Conference, we're going to have a NAFIPS, the North America Fuzzy Information Processing. It's going to be 1 week earlier. So those who are interested in them could come to NAFIPS and then go down straight to Rio in one shot. This is interesting because in average, we have about 100 people. Just to give you an idea, FUSA EEE, at least until 1 week ago, was about 300 people. Maybe it's 600 tomorrow. So this is a major. Thank you very much for your time.